Hello. Are you ready for chapter 12? Yes, I did color over that ugly yellow big thing with silver Sharpie so that it matches silver chair. Remember, who gets to use silver Sharpies? Only the mothers. Maybe the dads, but mostly the moms. I'm going to take a drink out of one of my favorite cups from Washington Family Ranch, and that has one of my new stickers on the back. Do you see that? It says what? Shelter in Narnia. Hashtag shelter in Narnia. Because I'm a little tired of sheltering in place. So I'm going to pretend I'm sheltering in Narnia with you, which makes it that much more fun. And I'm wearing one of my buttons too. There. The sun is shining in the window, so it probably is reflecting a little bit. All right. So do you remember what happened? The man they met was sitting, he was acting weird, and then he had to be tied up in a silver chair. And he said, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to go nuts. And when I do, I'm probably going to tell you to take me out of the chair, but don't do it, because if you do, I'll turn into a giant green serpent. But they tied him. They didn't tie him up. The little gnome men did. And he did scream and say, let me go, let me go. Now is the only time that I'm not a lunatic. I'm sane. And let me out. And then he started talking about Narnia. And then he said, in the name of Aslan, loose my bonds. And that was the fourth sign. And so they had to decide what were they going to do. And they cut him loose. And then he came running at them with a sword. But he wasn't running at them. He was running at the chair. And he destroyed the chair. And then someone knocks at the door. And he, the man who is Prince Rilian, the person they've been looking for, he walked resolutely to the door and he flung it wide open. And he expects that it's going to be some of the Earthmen. That's what they call all the gnomes who are walking around. Earthmen. He thinks that's what it is. Chapter 12. The Queen of the Underland. Bum, bum, bum. Two Earthmen entered, but instead of advancing into the room, they placed themselves one on each side of the door and bowed deeply. They were followed immediately by the last person whom anyone had expected or wished to see. The first one would have been Aslan. It was the Lady of the Green Kirtle, the Queen of the Underland. She stood dead still in the doorway, and they could see her eyes moving as she took in the whole situation. The three strangers, the silver chair destroyed, and the prince free with his sword in his hand. It might be like if something has happened in your classroom that shouldn't have when the teacher left, and then she walked in and she went, or maybe with your mom or someone else. She knows that something happened that shouldn't, and they know that she knows because they saw it in her eyes. She turned very white. But Jill thought it was the sort of whiteness that comes over some people's faces, not when they are frightened, but when they are angry. For a moment, the witch fixed her eyes on the prince, and there was murder in them. Then she seemed to change her mind. Leave us, she said to the two Earthmen, and let none disturb us till I call, on pain of death. The gnomes padded away obediently, and the witch queen shut and locked the door. That is never a good thing. How now, my prince lord, she said, has your nightly fit not yet come upon you, or is it over so soon? Why stand you here unbound? Who are these aliens? And is it they who have destroyed the chair which was your only safety? Prince Rilian shivered as she spoke to him. And no wonder. It's not easy to throw off in half an hour an enchantment which has made one a slave for 10 years. Then, speaking with a great effort, he said, Madam, there will be no more need of that chair, and you, who have told me 100 times how deeply you pitied me for the sorceries by which I was bound, will doubtless hear with joy that they are now ended forever. There was, it seems, some small error in your ladyship's way of treating them. These, my true friends, have delivered me, and I am now in my right mind, and there are 2 things I will say to you. First, as for your ladyship's design of putting me at the head of an army of earthmen so that I may break out into the overworld, and there, by main force, make myself king over some nation that never did me any wrong, murdering their natural lords and holding their throne as a bloody and foreign tyrant, well, now that I know myself, I utterly abhor and renounce it as plain villainy. And second, I am the king's son of Narnia, Rilian, the only child of Caspian, 10th of that name, whom some call Caspian the Seafarer, because of his Dawn Treader adventure. Therefore, madame, it is my purpose, as it is also my duty, to depart suddenly from your highness's court into my own country. Please it you to grant me and my friends safe conduct and a guide through your dark realm. He was very polite, wasn't he? And very calm and controlled, considering what she'd been doing to him for so long. Now, the witch said nothing at all, but moved gently across the room, always keeping her face and eyes very steadily toward the prince. When she had come to a little ark set in the wall, not far from the fireplace, she opened it, and she took out first a handful of a green powder. This she threw on the fire. It didn't blaze much, but a very sweet and drowsy smell came from it. And all through the conversation which followed, that smell grew stronger and filled the room and made it harder to think. Secondly, she took out a musical instrument rather like a mandolin. Do you know what a mandolin is? It looks like a small guitar, has a rounder body. There might be a picture here that I'll get to show you. She began to play it with her fingers, a steady, monotonous thrumming that you didn't notice after a few minutes. But the less you noticed it, the more it got into your brain and your blood. This also made it hard to think. After she had thrummed for a time, and the sweet smell was now very strong, she began speaking in a sweet, quiet voice. "Narnia?" she said. "Narnia? I've often heard your lordship utter that name in your ravings. Dear prince, you are very sick. There is no land called Narnia." "Yes, there is, though, ma'am," said Puddleglum. "You see, I happen to have lived there all my life." "Indeed," said the witch. "Tell me, I pray, where that country is." "Up there," said Puddleglum stoutly, pointing overhead. I don't know exactly where." "How?" said the queen with a kind, soft, musical laugh. "Is there a country up among the stones and mortar on the roof?" "No," said Puddleglum, struggling a little to get his breath. "It's in Overworld." "And what or where, pray, is this, how do you call it, Overworld?" "Oh, don't be so silly," said Scrub, who was fighting hard against the enchantment of the sweet smell and the thrumming sound. Over and over and over. "As if you didn't know. It's up above, up where you can see the sky and the sun and the stars. Why, you've been there yourself. We met you there." "I cry you mercy, little brother," laughed the witch. You couldn't have heard a lovelier laugh, which is why I can't do it for you. "I have no memory of that meeting, but we often meet our friends in strange places when we dream, and unless we all dreamed alike, you must not ask them to remember it." "Madam," said the prince sternly, "I have already told your grace that I am the king's son of Narnia." "And shalt be, dear friend," said the witch in a soothing voice, as if she were humoring a child. shalt be king of many imagined lands in thy fancies. We've been there too, snapped Jill. She was very angry because she could feel the enchantment getting a hold of her every moment. But of course, the very fact that she could still feel it showed that it had not yet fully worked. And thou art queen of Narnia too, I doubt not, pretty one, said the witch in the same coaxing, half-mocking tone. I'm nothing of the sort, said Jill, stamping her foot. We come from another world. Oh, why, this is a prettier game than the other, said the witch. Tell us, little maid, where is this other world? What ships and chariots go between it and ours? Of course, a lot of things darted into Jill's head at once. Experiment House, her school, Adela Pennyfeather, the mean bully girl, her own home, radio sets, cinemas, cars, airplanes, radio station, cues. But they seemed dim and far away. Thrum, 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 went the strings of the witch's instrument. Jill couldn't remember the names of the things in our world, and this time it didn't come into her head that she was being enchanted, for now the magic was in its full strength, and of course the more enchanted you get, the more you feel that you are not enchanted at all. She found herself saying, and at the moment it was a relief to say, no, I suppose that other world must be all a dream. Yes, it is all a dream, said the witch, always thrumming on her mandolin. Yes, all a dream, said Jill. There never was such a world, said the witch. No, said Jill and Scrub, never was such a world. There never was any world but yours, said they. Oh, sorry. There never was any world but mine, said the witch. There never was any world but yours, said they. Now Puddleglum was still fighting hard. I don't know rightly what you all mean by a world, he said, talking like a man who hasn't had enough air, but you can play that fiddle till your fingers drop off, and still you won't make me forget Narnia. And the whole overworld, too. We'll never see it again, I shouldn't wonder. You may have blotted it out and turned it dark like this, for all I know. Nothing more likely. But I know I was there once. I've seen the sky full of stars. I've seen the sun coming up out of the sea of a morning and sinking behind the mountains at night. And I've seen him up in the midday sky when I couldn't look at him for brightness. Puddleglum's words had a very rousing effect. The other three all breathed again and looked at one another like people newly awaked. Why, there it is, cried the prince. Of course, the blessing of Aslan upon this honest marshwiggle. We have all been dreaming these last few minutes. How could we have forgotten it? Of course, we have all seen the sun. By Jove, so we have, said Scrub. Good for you, Puddleglum. You're the only one of us with any sense, I do believe. Then came the witch's voice, cooing softly like the voice of a wood pigeon from the high elms in an old garden at 3 o'clock in the middle of a sleepy summer afternoon. And it said, What is this sun that you all speak of? Do you mean anything by the word? Yes, we jolly well do, said Scrub. Can you tell me what it's like? Asked the witch. Thrum, 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 went the strings. Please it your grace, said the prince, very coldly and politely. You see that lamp? It is round and yellow and gives light to the whole room, and hangeth, moreover, from the roof. Now, that thing which we call the sun is like a lamp, only far greater and brighter. It giveth light to the whole overworld, and it hangeth in the sky. Hangeth from what, my lord? Asked the witch. And then, when they were all still thinking how to answer her, she added with another of her soft, silver laughs. You see, when you try to think out clearly what this sun must be, you cannot tell me. You can only tell me it is like the lamp. Your sun is a dream, and there is nothing in that dream that was not copied from the lamp. The lamp is the real thing. The sun is but a tale, a children's story." "Yes, I see now," said Jill in a heavy, hopeless tone. "It must be so." And while she said this, it seemed to her to make very good sense. Slowly and gravely the witch repeated, "There is no sun." And they all said nothing. She repeated in a softer and a deeper voice, "There is no sun." After a pause, and after a struggle in their minds, all four of them said together, "You are right. There is no sun." It was such a relief to give in and say it. "There was never a sun," said the witch. "No, there was never a sun," said the prince, and the marshwiggle, and the children. For the last few minutes, Jill had been feeling that there was something she must remember at all costs. And now she did. But it was so dreadfully hard to say it. She felt as if huge weights were laid on her lips. And at last, with an effort that seemed to take all the good out of her, she said, "There's Aslan." "Aslan?" said the witch, quickening ever so slightly the pace of her thrumming. "What a pretty name! What does it mean?" "He is the great lion who called us out of our own world," said Scrub, "and he sent us into this world to find Prince Rilian." "What is a lion?" said the witch. "Oh, hang it all," said Scrub. "Don't you know? How can we describe it to her? Have you ever seen a cat?" "Surely," said the queen. "I love cats." "Well, a lion is a little bit, only a little bit, mind you, like a huge cat with a mane. At least it's not like a horse's mane, you know. It's more like a judge's wig. It goes all around, and it's yellow and terrifically strong." The witch shook her head. "I see," she said, "that we should do no better with your lion, as you call it, than we did with your sun. You have seen lamps, and so you imagined a bigger and better lamp and called it the sun. You've seen cats, and now you want a bigger and better cat, and it's to be called a lion. Well, 'tis a pretty make-believe, though, to say truth, it would suit you all better if you were younger. And look how you can put nothing into your make-believe head without copying it from the real world, this world of mine, which is the only world. But even you children are too old for such play. As for you, my lord prince, that art a man full grown, fie upon you. Are you not ashamed of such toys? Come, all of you, put away these childish tricks. I have work for you all in the real world. There is no Narnia. There is no overworld, no sky, no sun, no Aslan. And now, to bed, all, and let us begin a wiser life tomorrow. But first, to bed, to sleep, deep sleep, soft pillows, sleep without foolish dreams." The prince and the two children were standing with their heads hung down, their cheeks flushed, their eyes half closed. The strength was all gone from them. The enchantment was almost complete. But Puddleglum, desperately gathering all his strength, walked over to the fire, and then he did a very brave thing. He knew it wouldn't hurt him quite as much as it would hurt a human, for his feet, which were bare, were webbed and hard and cold-blooded like a duck's. But he knew that it would hurt him badly enough anyway, and it did. With his bare foot, he stamped on the fire, grinding a large part of it into ashes on the flat hearth. And three things happened at once. First, the sweet, heavy smell grew very less, for though the whole fire had not been put out, a good bit of it had, and what remained smelt very largely of burnt marshwiggle, which is not at all an enchanting smell. This instantly made everyone's brain far clearer. The prince and the children held up their heads again and opened their eyes. Secondly, the witch, in a loud, terrible voice, utterly different from all the sweet tones that she'd been using up till now, called out, "What are you doing? Dare to touch my fire again, mud filth, and I'll turn the blood to fire inside your veins." Thirdly, the pain itself made Puddleglum's head for a moment perfectly clear, and he knew exactly what he was really thinking. There is nothing like a good shock of pain for dissolving certain kinds of magic. "One word, ma'am," he said, coming back from the fire, limping because of the pain. "One word. All you've been saying is quite right, I shouldn't wonder. I'm a chap who always liked to know the worst and then put the best face I can on it. So I won't deny any of what you said. But there's one thing to be said even so. Suppose we have only dreamed or made up all those things. Trees and grass and sun and moon and stars and Aslan himself. Suppose we have. Then all I can say is that, in that case, the made-up things seem a good deal more important than the real ones. Suppose this black pit of a kingdom of yours is the only world. Well, it strikes me as a pretty poor one. And that's a funny thing when you come to think of it. You say we're just babies making up a game, if you're right. But 4 babies playing a game can make a play world which licks your real world hollow. That's why I'm going to stand by the play world. I'm on Aslan's side, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live as like a Narnian as I can, even if there isn't any Narnia. So, thanking you kindly for our supper, if these two gentlemen and the young lady are ready, we're leaving your court at once, and we're setting out in the dark to spend our lives looking for the overland. Not that our lives will be very long, I should think, but that's small loss if the world's as dull a place as you say." "Oh, hurrah! Good old Puddleglum!" cried Scrub and Jill. But the prince suddenly shouted, "Beware! Look to the witch!" And when they did look, their hair nearly stood on end. The instrument dropped from her hands. Her arms appeared to be fastened to her sides. Wait, I forgot to show you something before I keep reading. This is when she was singing to them with her instrument. See how beautiful and kind and gentle and good she looks? Now listen to what's going to happen. Oops. Oh, that was so bad. I didn't have that in the right spot. "Beware! Look to the witch!" And when they did, their hair nearly stood on end. The instrument dropped from her hands. Her arms appeared to be fastened to her sides. Her legs were intertwined with each other, and her feet had disappeared. The long green train of her skirt thickened and grew solid, and it seemed to be all one piece with the writhing green pillar of her interlocked legs. And that writhing green pillar was curving and swaying as if it had no joints, or else as if it were all joints. Her head was thrown far back, and while her nose grew longer and longer, every other part of her face seemed to disappear except her eyes. Huge, flaming eyes they were now, without brows or lashes. All this takes time to write down, but it happened so quickly that there was only just time to see it. Long before there was time to do anything, the change was complete. And the great serpent, which the witch had become, green as poison, thick as Jill's waist, had flung 2 or 3 coils of its loathsome body round the prince's legs. Quick as lightning, another great loop darted around, intending to pinion his sword arm to his side. It was kind of like when the sea serpent was going to wrap around the Dawn Treader. But the prince was just in time. He raised his arms and got them clear, otherwise she would have wrapped around his arms. The living knot closed only round his chest. His arms were up and open, ready to crack his ribs like firewood when it drew tight. The prince caught the creature's neck in his left hand, trying to squeeze it till it choked. This held its face, if you could call it a face, about 5 inches from his own. It's right here. The forked tongue flickered horribly in and out, but it couldn't reach him. With his right hand, he drew back his sword for the strongest blow that he could give. Meanwhile, Scrub and Puddleglum had drawn their weapons and rushed to his aid. There is the horrible serpent wrapped around him. See how he got his arms free? You see Scrub and Puddleglum ready to run and help him. And Prince Rilian is holding that serpent's face away from him. Ugh. That is so gross. If it had wings, if it had wings and little legs, it would be a dragon. Because dragons really are just giant serpents with wings and legs. But this is so wicked looking. Look at how nasty its eyes look. It's filled with hate. I don't like it at all. So now Scrub and Puddleglum are running at it. All 3 blows fell at once. Scrub's, which didn't even pierce the scales and did no good, fell on the body of the snake just below the prince's hand. But the prince's own blow and Puddleglum's were both on its neck. But even that did not quite kill it, though it began to loosen its hold on Rilian's leg and chest. With repeated blows, they hacked off its head. The horrible thing went on coiling and moving like a bit of wire long after it had died. And the floor, as you may imagine, was a nasty mess. The prince, when he had his breath back, said, "Gentlemen, I thank you." Then the 3 conquerors stood staring at one another and panting, without another word, for a very long time. Jill had very wisely sat down and was keeping quiet. She was saying to herself, I do hope I don't faint or blub or do anything idiotic. I probably would have thrown up. "My royal mother is avenged," said Rilian presently. "This is undoubtedly the same worm that I pursued in vain by the fountain in the forest of Narnia so many years ago. All these years I have been the slave of my mother's slayer. Yet I am glad, gentlemen, that the foul witch took to her serpent form at the last. It would not have suited well either with my heart or with my honor to have slain a woman. But look to the lady," he meant Jill. "I'm all right, thanks," said she. "Damsel," said the prince, bowing to her. Damsel is an old medieval word for young lady, a very formal and kind, proper word. "You are of high courage, and therefore I doubt not you come of a noble blood in your own world. But come, friends, here is some wine left. Let us refresh ourselves and each pledge to his fellows. After that, to our plans." "A jolly good idea, sir," said Scrub. That is the end of chapter 12. I am so glad that they killed that snake. I hate snakes, but I especially hate wicked snakes.